coin hit the table, and for the first time all afternoon, the room went quiet. So why did the one man who could walk away choose not to? The laughter hadn't stopped when she stepped onto the platform. It only grew sharper, bouncing off the wooden beams like something meant to cut. Lila Mae Jackson stood still anyway, fingers locked tight at her waist, boots planted firm on splintered boards that had seen too many endings. One by one, men turned away, hats tipping low, as if refusing to look might erase her entirely. Then a chair scraped hard across the floor. The sound carried. A man moved through the crowd, slow and certain, until 2 silver coins struck the table with a dull, final weight. Lila lifted her eyes, not in relief, not in fear, but in question. Because men didn't spend their last money on strangers, not unless they had something to lose. If you had been standing in that room, would you have walked away or stepped forward? The boards creaked under her feet as she stepped onto the platform. Dust hung thick in the air, caught in the slanted afternoon light that slipped through the cracks of the barn walls. Somewhere behind her, a man laughed too loud. Another spat into the dirt. Lila Mae Jackson kept her eyes on the warped planks in front of her boots. They had called her name like it meant something, like it still belonged to her. "Step up now." "Last one," the auction man said, his voice worn thin from whiskey and shouting. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Not excitement. Something duller. Tired. Men shifted. Hats tipped back. Eyes ran over her the way a man checks a fence post. Quick, practical, already deciding it ain't worth fixing. No one spoke. The smell of sweat, tobacco, and old hay pressed in from all sides. Somewhere, a chair scraped. Somewhere else, someone coughed and muttered, "Let's be done with it." Lila didn't lift her head. She felt it anyway. Every look that didn't land. Every man who chose not to see her. $20, the auctioneer tried, softer this time. Nothing. 10. A few chuckles. A man in the back shook his head like he'd just heard a bad joke. 5. Silence stretched long enough to hurt. Lila's fingers tightened together at her waist. The fabric of her dress, patched too many times to remember its original color, rubbed rough against her skin. One of her shoes pinched at the heel. She didn't shift her weight. Didn't give them the satisfaction. 2, the auctioneer said at last, voice flat now. $2. Anyone? Someone snorted. Save it, another voice said. Ain't worth the trouble. The words didn't hit loud. They settled. Heavy. Lila drew in a slow breath through her nose. Held it. Let it out quiet. Still no one moved. Then, from the back of the barn, a chair scraped hard against the floor. It cut through the room. Bootsteps followed. Slow, measured, each one landing like it had somewhere to be. Heads turned. Lila lifted her eyes before she meant to. He was taller than any man in the room, broad shoulders filling the space like he didn't belong inside walls. His coat was worn but clean, dusted at the edges. His hat sat low, shadowing most of his face. Gideon Rourke. Even she knew the name. You heard it in town without trying, usually followed by lowered voices. He didn't look at the other men, didn't acknowledge the laughter that started to ripple again. Quieter this time. He walked straight to the front. The auctioneer blinked, surprised into silence. Gideon reached into his pocket. Metal clicked against metal. 2 silver dollars. He set them down on the rough table. The sound was small, solid. I'll take her. No haggling. No glance around for approval. Just that. A pause fell over the room. Not the same as before. This one carried weight. Then the laughter came back, louder, sharper. Rourke finally lost his mind. $2 for trouble. Fits him, I guess. Gideon didn't turn. Lila watched him. Really watched him. He wasn't smiling. Wasn't angry either. Just there. Like the noise didn't reach him. The auctioneer cleared his throat, eager to have it along. Papers were pushed forward. Ink bottle uncorked. Sign here. Gideon took the pen first. His hand was steady. He didn't linger. When he passed it to her, their fingers didn't touch. Lila looked down at the paper. Her name was already written there. Waiting. She picked up the pen. For a second, the room faded. The noise, the smell, the weight of eyes. Just the paper. The ink. Her hand didn't shake. Lila Mae Jackson. The letters came out clean. Straight. She set the pen back down. Done, the auctioneer muttered, already reaching for the coins. Chairs scraped again. Men stood, losing interest now that the show was over. The sound of boots moving out into the daylight filled the barn. Gideon stepped aside, giving her space to come down. He didn't offer his hand. She didn't ask. The sun outside hit hard after the dim, bright enough to make her blink. The air smelled different out here, less trapped, still dry. They walked a few steps apart. His wagon waited near the fence. Old wood. One wheel slightly off, true. A gray horse stood hitched, tail flicking slow. Lila stopped before reaching it. Gideon turned then, just enough to face her. Up close, his face was rougher than she expected. Lines cut deep from sun and wind. Eyes steady, watching, but not prying. She studied him the same way. Then she spoke. "Did you just buy yourself a problem?" she said, her voice even or a promise. The wind moved through the grass beyond the fence. A loose board on the wagon knocked softly against its frame. Gideon held her gaze. Didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was low, plain. "Don't know yet." That might have been the first honest thing she'd heard all day. Lila nodded once. Then she stepped past him and climbed into the wagon on her own. Gideon watched for a second, just a second. Then he followed, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. The horse started forward. Behind them, the barn door slammed shut. No one called after them. The wagon rolled over dry ground, the wheels groaning like they had something to complain about. No one called after them. Gideon didn't look back. Neither did Lila. The town slipped behind, slow. First the barn, then the scattered buildings, then nothing but open land and a long stretch of wind. They rode in silence. The sun dipped lower, turning the hills a dull gold. Dust clung to everything. Lila kept her hands folded in her lap, steady, though the wagon jolted hard over ruts deep enough to twist an ankle. Gideon handled the reins without hurry. No wasted movement, no conversation. After a while, Lila spoke. "How far?" "An hour," he said. That was all. She nodded once and let the quiet settle again. By the time the land began to slope upward, the air had cooled. The wind carried the smell of dry grass and something older, wood. Maybe. Then she saw it. The ranch. It sat low against the rise like it had been trying to hold its ground and got tired halfway through. The fence leaned in places, posts crooked. A section near the gate had fallen entirely, patched with wire that didn't match the rest. The barn stood off to one side, door half open, one hinge sagging, no sound of cattle, no movement. Gideon pulled the wagon to a stop. "This is it," he said. Lila stepped down on her own. Her boots hit the dirt firm. She took a slow look around, not judging, just taking it in. Gideon unhitched the horse, tying the reins to the post that still stood straight. He didn't watch her, didn't explain. Inside the house, it was dim but clean enough. One table, 2 chairs, a cast-iron stove near the wall, a narrow bed in the corner behind a thin curtain. A tin cup sat upside down beside the sink. A folded receipt lay near it, edges curled from use. Lila walked in, slow. Her hand brushed the back of a chair, testing it like it might give. "It'll hold," Gideon said from behind her. She didn't turn. "I wasn't worried about the chair," she replied. He set her small bag by the wall. "That space is yours," he said, nodding toward the bed. "I'll take the floor." Lila looked at him then. Not surprised, just measuring. "You always sleep on the floor?" "Not always." She held his gaze a moment longer. Then she nodded. "All right. No argument. No gratitude either. Just acceptance." Gideon moved to the stove. He poured water into a dented kettle, set it over the fire. The sound of metal meeting iron was louder than it should have been. Lila crossed to the table. She picked up the receipt, turned it once, then again. Gideon watched from the corner of his eye. "You read?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Yes." That was it. The kettle began to hum softly. Lila set the receipt back down, but not where it had been. A few inches to the side, aligned with the edge of the table. Her fingers moved next to a small stack of papers tucked near the wall. She didn't open them, just tapped them lightly, as if counting without looking. "Your feed costs," she said after a moment. "They don't match the last entry." Gideon didn't answer right away. He poured the water into the tin cup. "They're close enough." Lila glanced up. "Close enough is how you lose money without noticing." The words landed soft, but they stayed. Gideon leaned back against the counter, arms loose at his sides. "You planning to fix it?" "I'm planning to understand it." She slid the papers back where she found them. Outside, a loose board knocked against the fence. The wind picked up, low and steady. Gideon handed her the cup. She took it, careful not to touch his hand. "Thank you." First time she'd said it. He gave a small nod. They stood there a moment. Not close, not far either. Later, when the light faded and the sky turned deep blue, Lila stepped outside. The ground was colder now, the air sharper. The gate creaked as it shifted in the wind, one hinge barely holding. She reached out and steadied it. Then she noticed something. The latch. It had been tied once. Recently. The rope still hung loose, frayed at the end. Not broken. Untied. She let it hang. Behind her, the door opened. Gideon stepped out, quiet as ever. "You expecting someone?" she asked without turning. "No." She nodded toward the gate. "Someone left it open before." He walked closer, looked at it, didn't say anything. Lila turned then, her face unreadable. "Things don't fall apart all on their own," she said. Gideon met her eyes. For a second, something shifted there. Not surprise, not denial. Recognition. Then it was gone. "Get some rest," he said. Lila looked at the house, then back at him. "Tomorrow," she said. "I want to see everything." Gideon held her gaze. "All right." That night, they lay on opposite sides of the same room. No words passed between them, only the sound of wind through broken fence lines, and the quiet sense that neither of them was alone in the trouble waiting just outside. Morning came thin and gray, the kind of light that didn't warm anything. Gideon was already up when Lila stepped out from behind the curtain. Coffee sat on the stove, black and steady, steam rising in a slow curl. He didn't look at her, but he had set out a second cup. She took it, nodded once. Then she walked past him and opened the door. Cold air slipped in. The land looked the same as yesterday, dry, open, still. But something about it felt watched. They didn't speak much while they worked. Gideon checked the fence line, retied what held, hammered in a loose post with slow, heavy swings. Lila moved through the yard, not aimless. She counted things without writing them down. Feed sacks, tools, empty space where something should have been. By midday, she found him near the barn. "We can't stay here," she said. He didn't stop working. "We are." She stepped closer, boots crunching over gravel. "You're being squeezed." That made him pause, just for a second. Then he drove the hammer down again. "I manage." "No," she said, quiet but firm. "You're being managed." He set the hammer aside, turned to face her. She didn't back up. "The prices in town," she continued, "they're not just low, they're consistent, too consistent. Your receipts don't line up because they're not meant to." Gideon watched her. Not defensive, not convinced either. "You got a better answer?" "Yes." She let that sit. "Silver Junction," she said. 3 days north. Different buyers, different routes. He looked past her, out toward the open land. "That road's rough." "So is staying." A long pause. Wind moved through the broken fence again. That same loose knock. Gideon exhaled slow. Then he walked past her toward the corral. By evening, the saddle was on the horse. No announcement, no agreement spoken out loud. Just a decision made. Lila watched from the doorway. Then she turned back inside and started gathering what little they had. 2 blankets. A small tin box. The stack of papers from the table. She hesitated with those, then tucked them carefully into her bag. By sunrise, they were moving. The herd wasn't much. A handful of cattle, lean but steady. Enough to matter. Not enough to spare. Gideon rode ahead. Lila followed behind, keeping the strays in line. They didn't ride close, but they didn't drift far either. The first day passed without trouble. Just long stretches of land and the steady rhythm of hooves on dirt. That night, they made camp near a low ridge. No fire, just a piece of bread split in half. Lila sat on one side of a rock, Gideon on the other. She pulled out a folded map, worn at the edges. "You've taken this route before?" she asked. "Once." "Made it?" He looked at her. "I'm here." That was answer enough. Sometime past midnight, a sound broke the quiet. A soft clink, metal. Lila's eyes opened first. She didn't move. Another sound, faint. A gate? No. Leather shifting. She turned her head slightly. Gideon was already up. Still as stone. Then came the low shuffle of hooves. One of the cattle had wandered, or been moved. Gideon didn't speak, just moved. Lila followed. They found the gap a few yards out. A rope cut clean, not torn. Cut. One cow was gone. Gideon stood there a long second. Then he turned back without a word. No shouting, no anger. Just a quiet tightening in the way he walked. They didn't sleep after that. By morning, the trail stretched longer, heavier. The second day brought worse. A shot echoed in the distance. Not close, not meant to hit, just close enough to turn the herd uneasy. Lila's hands tightened on the reins. "Warning," she said. Gideon nodded once. They kept moving, faster now. By afternoon, the land dipped toward a narrow river bend. One of the younger cows slipped near the edge, hooves scrambling against wet stone. Lila moved without thinking. She pulled hard on the line, boots digging into the dirt. "Easy," she murmured, voice steady though her grip trembled. "Easy now." The rope burned against her palm. The cow jerked. Gideon was there a second later. No rush, no panic. He stepped in, braced his weight, and guided the animal back up with slow, firm pressure. It took a moment. Then it was over. The cow steadied. Lila let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She didn't look at him right away. When she did, he was already checking the rest of the herd. No praise, no comment. But he didn't walk away either. That night, they sat closer to the fire, not touching, but not on opposite sides anymore. Lila broke the bread again, handed him half. Their fingers brushed this time, just barely. Neither pulled back too fast. She glanced at the map again. "If we turn back," she said quietly, "we lose everything." Gideon stared into the fire. Then he nodded. "Then we don't turn back." The wind carried something faint through the dark. Not sound. A feeling. Like eyes just beyond the edge of the light. Watching. Waiting. That feeling stayed with them all through the last stretch of road. By the time Silver Junction came into view, both of them were riding quieter than before. Not from fear. From knowing something had already been set in motion. The town sat low in a shallow valley, smoke drifting from a few chimneys, wagons lined near the stockyard. It looked busy enough, honest, at a glance, but not everything honest showed itself right away. They pushed the herd through the gate near dusk. A man with a ledger stood by the rail, sleeves rolled, pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked up once, took in the cattle, then Gideon. "Price dropped this week," he said, already writing. Gideon didn't argue, didn't ask why, just nodded once. Lila stepped forward. "How much?" The man barely looked at her. "Not much." She didn't move. "Numbers," she said. That made him pause. He flipped the page, slower this time. Named a figure. Too low. Lila didn't react right away. She just took the number in, held it there. Then she turned to Gideon. "That won't cover what they claim you owe." Gideon knew that already. He didn't say it. The cattle were taken, counted, paid for. A folded receipt changed hands. Lila unfolded it right there, ran her eyes over every line. Then she folded it again. Careful. Precise. That night they stayed in a narrow boarding room above a general store. One bed, one chair, a basin of cold water on a wooden stand. Gideon sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on. Lila stood by the table, papers spread out. The lamplight flickered. "You were right," she said. He looked up. "They've been inflating what you owe. Not by much each time. Just enough to keep you behind." Gideon didn't look surprised. Figured. Figuring doesn't stop it. Silence. Lila picked up the receipt from that day, held it next to an older one. "They're using the same hand," she said. "Different towns, same handwriting." That landed. Gideon leaned forward slightly. "You sure?" She slid both papers across to him. "Look at the numbers. Same curl on the sevens, same break in the eights." He studied them longer than he had anything else. Then he leaned back again. "Pike," he said. Not a guess. A fact. Morning came colder. They rode back into town, not for supplies, for answers. The bank sat near the center, brick and quiet, too clean compared to the rest of the street. Inside, the air smelled like paper and ink. A clerk looked up, then past them, like he expected someone else to step in. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice careful. Lila stepped forward. "We need to see the loan records for Gideon Rourke." The man hesitated. Gideon didn't move, just stood there, solid, waiting. The clerk shifted. "I'll see what I can." The door behind them opened. Bootsteps, confident, familiar in a way that didn't need introduction. Harland Pike. He walked in like the room already belonged to him. Hat clean, coat fitted just right, no dust on his boots. He smiled. "Well now," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." Gideon turned slowly. Lila didn't. Pike's eyes flicked to her, measured, dismissed. Then back to Gideon. "Still chasing numbers you can't catch?" he said lightly. Gideon didn't answer. Lila picked up one of the papers from the desk. "This your handwriting?" she asked. The room shifted. Pike glanced at the paper, then at her. "Ma'am," he said, polite on the surface, "you don't understand how business works out here." "I understand patterns," she said. Her voice didn't rise, didn't need to. "You lower his sale prices in town," she continued, "and raise his debt on paper. Different places, same hand, same result." The clerk behind the desk went very still. Pike's smile didn't break. "You're making accusations. I'm making observations." A pause, long enough for the room to feel it. Gideon didn't step in, didn't stop her, just stood there. That mattered. The door opened again. An older man stepped in. Slow, worn coat, hands rough from work. Silas Reed. He took off his hat, eyes moving from Gideon to Pike, to the papers in Lila's hand. Then he spoke. "Same thing happened to me," he said. No anger, just truth. The room tightened. Pike's smile finally slipped. "Just a fraction." "Careful what you say, Silas," he replied. Silas didn't back down. "Careful's what got me here." Lila set the paper down on the counter. Flat. Visible. Gideon looked at Pike then. Really looked. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Pike straightened his coat. Recovered. "This isn't finished," he said. "Quieter now, huh?" "No," Lila replied. "It isn't." He left without another word. The door shut behind him. The room stayed silent. Gideon exhaled slow. Not relief, something heavier. He turned to Lila. For the first time since the auction, there was no distance in the way he looked at her. Not suspicion. Not confusion. Something closer to recognition. "You saw it," he said. She nodded. It was always there, a beat past. Then he said, "I didn't." Lila folded the papers again. "Careful. You weren't supposed to." Outside, the wind moved through the street again, but it didn't feel the same. Something had shifted, not solved, but seen. That was the difference. When they rode back toward Rattlesnake Ridge, the land didn't look any kinder. Same dry stretches, same leaning fences, same wind pushing dust along the road. But Gideon didn't ride the same. He didn't look away from things anymore. Not the broken gate, not the empty corral, not the place where something had been slipping through his hands for too long. They reached the ranch near sundown. The sky burned low and orange behind the hills. The house stood the same as they left it, quiet, waiting. Lila stepped down first. She didn't pause this time. Didn't stand back and measure the place like it was something uncertain. She walked straight to the gate, lifted the loose rope, looked at the cut end again. Then she tied it tighter, a simple knot. Clean. Gideon watched her from the wagon, didn't say anything. But he saw it. That small change. Inside, the air felt different, still plain, still worn, but not empty. Lila set her bag on the table, pulled out the papers, spread them out again, same as before, but this time she didn't keep them to herself. She turned them so he could see. "These don't go back in a drawer," she said. Gideon stepped closer, looked down at the numbers, the marks he used to skip past. He nodded once. No. That night they ate at the same table, not across from each other, beside. No words about what came next. Just the quiet sound of a fork against tin, a cup set down a little too carefully. The next morning, Gideon rode into town, not to sell, not to ask, to stand. Word had already started moving. It always did. Silas Reed was there first, leaning on the hitching post outside the bank. He tipped his hat. "Didn't think you'd come back quiet," he said. Gideon didn't answer. Didn't need to. Inside, the clerk looked different this time. Less certain. The same desk, same ledgers, but not the same room. Lila stood beside Gideon. She set the papers down again. One by one. Not rushed, not loud. Just enough. "These don't match," she said. The clerk swallowed, reached for them. Didn't flip as fast this time. Outside, a few more men gathered. Not close, just near enough to listen. Silas stepped in behind them. Didn't speak. Just stood there. That was enough. Harlan Pike didn't show that morning. Didn't need to. The shift had already begun. Numbers were corrected. Slowly. Carefully. Not all at once. But enough. Enough that when Gideon walked out of that bank, the weight on his shoulders had changed. Not gone. But shared. They rode back together. The wind followed, same as always, but it didn't press as hard. Days passed. The fence went up straighter, one post at a time. The barn door got fixed. Hinges tightened. No more sag. A few cattle returned. Not many, but more than none. Lila worked the table at night. Ledgers open. Ink steady. Sometimes Gideon sat across from her, sometimes beside. Never far. One afternoon, as the cold started to settle in early, Lila folded her clothes into the same small bag she'd arrived with. Gideon saw it. Didn't stop her. Just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You leaving?" he asked. She didn't look up right away. "Winter's coming," she said. "Roads will close soon." He nodded. "That's true." Silence stretched. Lila closed the bag, set it on the table. Then she turned. Gideon reached into his pocket, pulled out 2 coins. Silver, worn at the edges. He placed them on the table between them. Same sound as before. Small. Solid. "I don't know what to call this," he said. His voice didn't change much, but it held. "I know what it started as." Lila's eyes dropped to the coins, then back to him. "I don't want it to end that way." He didn't step closer, didn't ask, just stood there, giving her space to choose. Lila looked at the door, then at the window, the land beyond it, then back at the table, at the papers, at the 2 names written there. She reached out, not for the coins, for the ledger, pulled it closer, dipped the pen into ink, and added a line beneath Gideon Rourke, her handwriting steady. Lila Mae Jackson. No flourish, no pause. When she finished, she set the pen down, closed the book. The coins stayed where they were, unmoved, but no longer the center of anything. Gideon watched her, a long second. Then he gave a small nod. Not victory, not relief, just understanding. Outside, the wind moved through the fence again, but this time nothing rattled loose. Inside, the fire burned low and steady, and for the first time since that dusty barn, neither of them stood alone inside the choice they'd made. Do you want me to continue or expand any chapter further? The fire burned low that night, steady and quiet, the kind that didn't need tending every few minutes. Outside, the wind still moved across the land the same way it always had, over broken fences, through dry grass, past places that had seen better days. But inside that small house, something had settled. Not perfect, not finished, just steady. Two people sat at the same table they once stood apart from. No grand words had been spoken, no promises carved in stone, just a choice made without pressure, without fear. And sometimes, that's the only kind that lasts. If you think about it, it wasn't the $2 that changed anything. It was what came after. A man who stopped looking away, a woman who refused to disappear. Two people, both worn down in their own way, deciding, quietly, not to stand alone anymore. Out here, in a place where the land doesn't forgive easy, that kind of choice matters. So maybe the question isn't what something costs. Maybe it's what you're willing to stand for, when it would be easier to walk away. If you were standing in that barn, or at that table, what would you have chosen? And if stories like this stay with you, the kind that feel a little rough around the edges, a little too real to forget, there are more waiting just beyond this one. Stories about people who didn't have much, but held on anyway.